This is intended to be a conversation, and we want a lot of interaction from the audience. So if you feel comfortable switching on the camera, if you're not sat there in your pants, please do switch on the camera so that we can see the faces. I think there's 23 of us, so it's enough to see everybody on the screen. And what we're going to do is just invite Amanda, Jane and Andrew to talk for 3 or 4 minutes and give their perspective on why we think Birmingham is punching below its weight potentially, and what we can do about it. But this isn't intended to be a moan fest. Actually, the spirit of this session is an optimistic spirit. What we want to do is talk about, challenges if they exist, but we want to talk about what we can do and what the solutions are. And for that, we need your insight, your voice, your opinions. The panelists may be polemic at times, hopefully. So if you agree with something, let us know in the chat. If you disagree with something, let us know in the chat. Let's have a steady stream of the chat going as we go, because panelists are only going to speak for about 10 minutes and then we're going to see where the session goes. So Amanda, back to you. What's your view of what we can do better, or what needs to change, or what needs to happen?
I mean, I'm sure there's a big long list that everyone can rhyme off now from, you've got a lot of the options there in the poll about local authority support, political support, investment, getting more VC and angel attention. There's a very long list. For me, there's 2 things in particular. One is we have a lot of positives here. We have more startups than most other places outside the capital at the moment. So we've got the basics to start with, to build on. And I think there can be a little bit woe is me in most sectors about external support. We could all do with more in every single sector. Tech is no different than others in that, but it's got huge potential. As a comms person, as a brand person, someone who tells stories every day, the other point I would make is the storytelling element. You've got it in the poll there about, should there be more done to promote the region and its tech community, which I absolutely agree with. Yes, we should, as a community, be promoting ourselves more. We should have more backing. But if you look back historically at how this has been done before, we've had tech run before, we've had various campaigns to promote the region's tech community, and they've worked and done well, and there's also been others that haven't done so well. What's interesting to me, though, is that when you look at stories, it is normally and usually stories about individuals, people, individual tales that really cut through. So we talk about rocking our rock stars. So, if we look at Ben Francis, right, he's our big story at the moment. He's the one we all talk about. Gymshark's the one we all talk about. But the story of Ben Francis and pizza delivery boy come good, told constantly, repeatedly, consistently, with the same messages over and over and over and over again on every channel by everyone until we're all fans, is kind of what we need more of. We need, and I'm sure we'll all talk about how we need more Gymsharks, but we need more of the Ben Francis story. We need more of our individuals, more of the people that are here to be telling their individual tales about how they've got their businesses to where they are and what their ambition is. So as much as I think we can look externally for support, there is something about your own story and constantly telling it. We all get busy, we all get heads down, and that side can kind of wean away when we've got a bit of investment, we've got a bit more team behind us, when we just want to get on with the job. But unless we keep that story going, we don't make it up to the next level, because the basics aren't there. The story hasn't been told over time. So for me, there's a big part there, as you would imagine me to say, about brand storytelling, both for the region, but individually as businesses and those running them.
Cool. Jay, moving on to you. What's your view? What angle are you going to take?
So I'm going to give a brief overview of investments. So private investment, specifically venture capital. And I spent a late night last night while watching Airplane in the background, pulling some figures from Deal Room. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yeah.
Hang on, where's it play? So for me, this isn't about making judgment. This is about sort of taking a deeper exploration into, okay, what might be a challenge here for us? So we know 2 things, right? So Birmingham has the most startups outside of London. So that's a great thing to shout about. And Birmingham also has the most investments of any city outside of London. Well, that investment is sort of a large, broad stroke. When we look at digital tech, so this data is all pulled from Deal Room, which is sort of the national database of venture capital private equity investments. So pulling from the sort of last 5 years cumulatively, like Birmingham is sort of down here, and as a city we rank between 10 and 12 each year for sort of external investment coming in. London's not in this because London's not comparable. London's like a global tech hub. And then when you look at these other cities, so Cambridge, Oxford have a lot of deep AI, deep tech, medical, biotech, driven by the universities and the prestige that they're. Manchester sort of up here, but I sort of look at this as sort of above and below the line here. So below the line, we have 3 cities, or sort of 5 cities that are sort of former industrial heartlands where sort of they're moving towards digital transformation. And at Birmingham, we're sort of in the middle here, 87 million pounds over the time. I'm from Liverpool, so we're bringing up the rear there. So if I dive into this, I'm just going to hide the side bit here. So this is I wanted to look at trends and see, well, actually, is investment the cause or the effect of a lack of scale ups here? So I thought, well, let's just trend us against Leeds and Newcastle because they're quite similar cities at a similar stage. We started at similar time adopting tech, and we're sort of bringing in the similar numbers per year. So Birmingham is the sort of cyan color here. What you can see is like we tracked really closely against Leeds for the first 4 years, and Newcastle, although they had 2 years that were greater, we had 2 years that were greater. So up until the start of this year, ourselves, Leeds and Newcastle were pretty much level. But then something really interesting has happened. So as the pandemic has kicked in, obviously the country's gone into lockdown, but digital tech has actually thrived. You know, it's seen record investments. And the really interesting thing is, like, so in Birmingham, we've seen one of the worst years for investments. We've only had 5 million invested, where when you look at Leeds, they've got 40 million, and Newcastle are now approaching 50 million. So this to me suggests that there's a real scale-up issue here going on, where Leeds and Newcastle have technology companies that have thrived in the pandemic. And actually the companies we've got here, digital tech-wise, have not been able to do the same. And when you look at the trend lines, we're sort of flat now as a result. So those 4 years of really strong growth have sort of been eroded away by this year's lack of investment, whereas sort of Leeds and Newcastle have now sort of gone on. I started to do a deeper dive here because I thought, well, actually, maybe one company just had a huge amount of money come in, you know, maybe 15, 20 million. So actually, how many individual rounds has there been? So a round is that, you know, typically a company will only go through 1 round a year. So this is quite indicative of how many companies have had investment. And again, you can see this sort of pattern emerging where we've been quite strong. So eight rounds, 15, 13, 10. But likewise, so Leeds have been quite flat as well, 11, 9, 12, 9. Newcastle have actually been decreasing. But then when you look at this end bit here, 2020 again, so only 3 companies in the region have raised any money this year in Birmingham versus 9 in Newcastle. And the bit you can infer from here is that actually these 2016 companies, you know, 19 of them raised money. Have 9 of those gone on to raise, you know, a Series A or Series B and actually started really, really scaling up. So this is really interesting thing that, you know, a bit of a data nerd, so I love diving into this. Oh, so So then I then thought, well, actually, we know how much is being invested overall, and we know how many companies are raising money. So what does that mean for the average round? So, you know, how much on average is each company raising when they go to raise? Because this will have a big factor on how many people you can employ, how much further the company has runway, and whether you're really going aggressive and really scaling, or whether it's just sort of slow growth and finding product market fit. Now, the thing you'll notice is that 2016 to 2019, we're all quite level. So there's just this gradual growth going up again and again. And you can see here that, you know, really strong growth in Birmingham these 4 years. Everyone had a bit of a dip in 2017. But again, this year, and you look at this, and so 3 companies in Birmingham have raised 2 million. 2 million is the average round in Birmingham versus in Leeds, the average round was 8 million, near enough, and almost 6 in Newcastle. So that's a real indication that they've got companies who are now scaling. Then I think this is the last one. Yeah, this is the last one. I won't bore you too much with data, but I thought, well, actually, this makes me think about, does the city have a pipeline, right, of generating scale-up companies? Because you basically start a company, and I did myself. You have an idea, you start selling to the market, you hire some people, you start selling some more, you hire more people, and through that process, you go through certain stages. So seed funding early to hire a bigger team, Series A, which is typically about really getting that company moving and closing the revenue. Then Series B, which is usually about either expanding globally or really about sort of dominating your industry. Now, I added Manchester in here because at the start of this presentation, so Manchester's has 10 times more investment over the period and has a stronger pipeline of developing scale-up companies. What you can see here, so Manchester, you want a good pipeline here. So you want, a big portion of companies getting seed funding, so 46% of those companies. They then go on to get early VC, and then most importantly, they're then going to get Series A, and then they get Series B. So you've got the sort of full funnel there. And when you compare it against ourselves, Newcastle and Leeds, none of our three cities have any Series B rounds, which is quite interesting. But when you look at Birmingham, the difference is a lot of it is skewed down here at seed. So obviously this needs much deeper investigation, and I think I'm going to do a big piece of analysis myself and then sort of try and feed that back. But my feeling is that our companies are quite, we're good at starting companies and we're good at getting that early investment in. But the bit we're not good at is actually getting them over the hurdle from, okay, you've hired a team and you're selling a bit, or you're raising a bit of revenue. How do you really scale up, and how do you start to take this national, and how do you become like a national household name? Because you can see here that only 12% of our companies go on to close any early investments. A few more jumping across this chasm to Series A, but I think it's this gap here that I looked at and thought, well, this is quite indicative of like the scaling problem that we're seeing, I think, elsewhere. But yeah, I'll leave it there because I chucked a lot of information at you all.
Cool. Excellent, Jay. Thank you. Love a bit of data, so it was really good. Okay, so Andrew, do you want to bring your perspective in, and then we're going to open it up? We've got some good viewpoints and questions coming in the chat, which we'll return to. But what's your take, Andrew? So you're in a business that's 60 people, that's growing. So give us your perspective.
I think first of all, I thought Jay's presentation was great, and at the same time terrible, because it kind of points out, the size of the challenge that we've got and the degree to which we're kind of punching below our weight. But I think, as you said at the start, Chris, I think it's really important we remember that it's not all doom and gloom. There are some things we do well. There are some things we don't do quite so well as we could, and as a Brummie of a certain age, I feel like I have to point out how much the city has changed for the better over a longer period of time. And I think, like Jay and Amanda both touched on this, is that in terms of startups, the numbers are much better. And the ones I looked at were for 2018. It was I think it's 12,000 startups in Birmingham. Then I think next was Glasgow with 8,000, I think. But interestingly, I looked at the same statistics for London, and it was 190,000, which kind of tells its own story, which is probably worth a session on its own. But anyway, I think when you look at that, and you look at the fact that we consistently have the highest levels of foreign direct investment outside London, the money looks to me like it's coming in, but it's not finding its way to the tech scene. And this is without stating the obvious, this is where we need to improve things. And I think from Jay's presentation, the thing that really comes through is that as he said, we're good at startups, but not quite so good at scale ups. I'm going to mention Gymshark, and I kind of had a bet with myself that we'd all mention Gymshark at some point during this. But it's fantastic that we've got such a brilliant story, and I think we all know Ben Francis's backstory, 100% by now. But I think that the conversation around that, it seems to be more around like, isn't Gymshark great, and isn't it is an amazing story? But I think that what the conversation really should be is, where's the next one coming from? And you know, if you look at how Gymsharp grew, they used a kind of path to growth, which is quite, despite they're not really a tech company, but they used a path to scaling up, which is quite similar to what you see in the tech sector. And kind of the thing that came out to me is it's very difficult to point to any one thing that we're doing, which is being done badly. I think where the gains are for us is that we need to improve collaboration, and I think that element of collaboration comes from a number of stakeholders. I think us in the tech sector, we're obviously a big part of it. I think we've got a pretty vibrant tech sector now. I think, and Jay pointed this out in the LinkedIn discussion, I totally agree. One of the things we struggle with is the fact that we don't have a tech hotspot. If you looked at the Birmingham tech sector, it's kind of Digbeth, Aston, Jewellery Quarter. It's kind of scattered around the edges of the city centre. So I think we have to work a little bit more for cohesion there. But I really think stuff like Birmingham Tech and Tech Week and Silicon Canal, this sort of initiative is absolutely vital in getting people together and the right people having the right discussions. I do think local government plays a part of it, because I think kind of their role is to help set the scene and to help smooth the path to growth. And I think you have to remember, like, Birmingham's got like a very long history of very poor local government, which is kind of ironic, because if you go back to Victorian times, we invented good local government. So it's a bit disappointing. I think for a long time that companies in the city have succeeded despite local government rather than because of it. And I think with things like the I almost said YMCA then, the WMCA is a chance for a real step change, and they've done some good things like getting 5G into the city early. But we really do need that level of local government and local administration to be kind of proactively working with us. I think another aspect to look is the talent pool. I've been like people in my sort of role will tell you that hiring is a nightmare, and in general it is. I would say it's a nightmare everywhere, because good people are hard to find pretty much wherever you are. I think I read we have 80,000 university students in the city, 50 centres of tech excellence, which is a good start. I think in terms of BAME representation in the workforce, in the tech workforce in Birmingham, that's something I would like to see improve considerably. I think I read a statistic that 26% of the local tech workforce are from BAME background, which is much better than the national, but needs to be better. And I think that's why organisations like Chris Mear and School of Code are absolutely fundamentally important in playing a role in this. Then I think we need to look at some of the companies who've like invested in the city. You know, we all know what the high profile relocators are, like Deutsche Bank, RBS, HSBC, who are bringing high skilled jobs, you know, many of them tech jobs to the city, and we need to get these companies working closer with us. And then finally, I think we need to look more at how we leverage our local strengths. And one thing that stood out for me, for example, is that what Birmingham doesn't have, that Manchester definitely has, and Leeds and Bristol to an extent, is a really active media sector. And the media sector and the tech sector often go hand in hand. And I think we don't have that in Birmingham. We used to 30 years ago, but you know, with the exit of the BBC and the reduction of local television and what have you, we've lost it. I think what we have got though is a very strong kind of legal and financial sector, and I wonder if maybe part of the way forward is for the legal and financial sector to work closer with the tech sector and attain some form of synergy. So, you know, like I say, I really believe that collaboration is an obvious way we can improve. And I think what we ideally want to get to is a situation where what we have, all the elements chipping together, is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think we're currently a fair way off that.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. So we've had our three panelists kind of give their views. We've got quite a lot of chat starting to build. So what I might do is invite people who've put stuff in the chat to, if they're happy to kind of voice their points. So Tracy Davenport. So Tracy, you work at Deloitte, and you put your first point about you think the West Mids actually does a good job of promoting the region. Do you want to come in and talk about your point?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I think just in general, there is a lot of good storytelling that is out there. I guess I would argue that it's not always the most consistent, and there's a lot of almost noise from the region. So if you're looking from outside of the region, you might know about big infrastructure projects, HS2, Arden Cross, etc., those types of things, but you won't necessarily know the stories about the businesses that have a unique, more of the Gymsharks, more of the unicorns that can be developed. And I guess that to me is probably one of the bigger challenges that exists. And, I know there's, the speakers discussed around a gap in local government or regional government leadership and lots of fluidity around that. But I think there's a role about sort of trying to have those stories more front and center, but then also the ability of getting, I think to Jay's point around kind of getting funding into these businesses outside of just seed funding, there's a need for getting some of these larger institutional investors to be looking at funding businesses and not just funding infrastructure, albeit that is important.
Cool. Thank you, Tracy. Panel, anything you want to add to that? We got Catherine O'Donnell as well, who responded to Tracy's point and brought in the view of the legacy view of Birmingham and how it's seen as a city. Catherine, do you want to share that point that you made?
Sure thing. So when you broadly speak,
we can't quite hear you, Catherine. I don't know if you get closer or there's a.
Move a bit closer to the screen. Yeah. Is that better? Okay. So nationally and sometimes internationally, Birmingham is very much seen as a legacy view. It's manufacturing, it's industry, it's car parts. Now that served us really, really well until the economic crash. And now they don't want to invest in what's seen as old technology. So if we need to really show that Birmingham is more than just its legacy, and as you say, it's changed so much in 15 years, but you need to actually get someone here to see it. They won't just take it on word of mouth. So potentially linking in more to promote Birmingham rather than the whole of the West Midlands. So yes, link in, but it has its own strengths that aren't really being shown right now.
Amanda, I think this is right up your street. What's your view?
It's funny because I've obviously sat inside a public sector local authority organisation telling these kinds of stories, and now I sit outside doing it for other businesses in the tech sector. Yes, there is more coordination that could be done. Absolutely, we've got some great organisations. We've got the LEP, we've got the Combined Authority, we've got the Growth Company, we've got loads, and we've got things like Birmingham Tech Week. I think for me, when in those organisations, you can create overall campaigns and you can work with the sector, but the best work is going to come from the sector itself and from the businesses itself. So if that sector can come together or come to these organisations and say, look, we've got these 4 businesses and we, the rock stars, and we want to showcase them because the reflected glory of those businesses will shine on all of us. And that's just how it works, particularly from a media perspective. You get one story out there, it brings the rest in. I think Catherine has probably given a very lively example of how a journalist media visit works. When you bring journalists to the city, they want to meet 15 businesses, but it'll be the one that they profile and the rest will be listed. But there's a reflected glory there to be had. So I think we can all point to these authorities and creating overall campaigns, and that is important. And there could be more collaboration there, and there could be more coordination. But for me, it's the individual stories. I come back to the Ben Francis example. He didn't go barging down the council's door to talk about his story, he just did it himself. I'm not saying that that's the ideal way, but I think there's a bit more about investing in our own brand and storytelling and moving it forward. Whether that solves all the funding issues, obviously not, but I think it will help us be memorable and change the overall regional's perceptions, because I think we are sometimes still considered as manufacturing, but actually the more you talk about to national media and international media, they have manufacturing, but also is what we need to grow out.
Is Birmingham too humble as a city?
Yes. Yes, and it's one of its best things, and the self-depreciation is amazing. I always tell a story years and years ago. Myself and my team, and we're at the growth company. We got it on New York Times. So we got Birmingham, come and visit Birmingham, New York Times thing. That was great. Nice media coverage, fantastic, really proud moment. However, it was the press release we then sent out to talk to Birmingham about what everyone else thought about it that then went mad. Birmingham only really believed in itself and really got involved in that when they realised that everyone else was saying how cool it was. So it's almost like we need to be told that we're cool to really big ourselves up. We need to just get a bit more out there and put those stories out, I think.
Yeah. Cool.
If I can jump in, I was going to say that the point earlier about car factories and what have you, we're based in Longbridge. So I work at a tech company which is based where there used to be a car factory. So kind of like, so it's my area. I totally agree with the being too humble about ourselves point. And I think there are some institutions which kind of don't really help. I think a lot of the local media have a tendency to be pretty negative. I think the BBC seem to. I almost feel suspicious enough that the BBC see their massive investment in Salford as requiring talking up of that part of the country, and the part of the country that kind of loses out most of that is in the Midlands. And I think we are too humble about what we've got. I read something once saying that Brummies will argue till the cows come home that their city is the second city, whereas Glaswegians and Liverpudlians will argue that theirs is the first. And I think there's a certain amount of truth in that.
Okay. Any more views from participants or anybody? Anything we could do to improve that? More stories. Well, let's move on, because I think, Jay, your stuff prompted a few questions. So Ken Baxter raised the question, and Ken, I don't know if you want to come in. Is it about the types of companies in those other areas?
Unmute button. There we go. We'll do the pause while we look for the unmute button. And yeah, that was kind of my first question. Really, is that I think you can look at you can look at the numbers and say there's kind of a lack of investment. But what are those types of companies? So it's almost, if there's a lot of startups that aren't getting invested, presumably there's a lot of startups that are failing.
Yeah.
So why are those startups failing? Because I've worked with a couple of quite successful businesses that have gone through various funding rounds, and they have had their biggest challenge in their early days of a scale up is that they just didn't have the basics in place that would make an investor interested in them. They didn't have a really strong business model. They didn't have a really strong vision. They didn't have a really strong financial plan. So they had a nice product and they had some nice customers, but they didn't have what an investor would actually be looking for. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, why are those, if there's no investment, is it because companies are doing something wrong? Is it because they don't have the right support?
Yeah.
I work for a tech company in Birmingham, or through a tech company, but we're a software business. We have no problem whatsoever recruiting good technical people in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no problem. In fact, we've got so many people on our books, we tend to use consultants and contractors. And I get inundated by recruiters daily in the region saying, I've got great people. So I don't think it's a people issue. I'm interested in, is it a business problem as to why people aren't getting funding?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm going to do a deeper analysis to see, okay, well, what sectors are these companies in? And also how many of these companies have survived, right? Because that's also an important thing. Like if you're raising money, but then you go bust because you spent it all, that's not necessarily an indicator of success. So I'll undertake that and that'll come out in time. But from what I've seen, I think it's a deeper cultural thing, right? So I'm a mentor on a number of the sort of accelerators, and I work across the region, and I get this like underlying sense that like raising like any like VC or external investment is people are quite opposed to it naturally here. Like the sort of de facto position of a lot of companies I meet is we're gonna grow and retain profits, and maybe we'll take a bank loan or we'll reinvest that. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that, and you want a mix of your economy to be that way. But when I go to other tech sectors and when I've worked in other places, it's almost the opposite. No one really wants to grow and retain profits. They're all very aggressive, and they're saying, well, actually, in 3 to 5 years, I want to exit here. So I need to raise big. I want to raise 2, 3, 4, 5 million here. scale really fast, do that classic like J-curve hockey stick movement, go fast, break things, and then retire at 30. And like, it's not necessarily right or wrong that you take that view. It's, horses for courses, but I think in the West Midlands and Birmingham specifically, there's a real like resistance to approach that. And I think that how big you dream then ties into things that you've mentioned about the vision, which is the thing we're talking about, the business plans. Because if you don't have this goal of, okay, I'm going to sell this company for multiples of millions in 5 years, the business plan is less important. And if you're just trucking along and you're doing business as usual, like, it's quite comfortable. So I think it's a real culmination of a lot of things, like culturally. The thing that I do notice, having worked in Manchester and Leeds, is that they have like a cultural swagger where Manchester relies heavily on the 90s, like club scene, Oasis, that whole movement, that sort of aggressive harshness, Manchester United, and then later Man City. Leeds also has a number of famous actors, musicians there, so it's quite artsy, and sort of I think that ties into the belief that the humble every person can go on, work really hard, and you can achieve amazing things. And I'm sure there's loads of examples of that in Birmingham, but I think they're quite hard to find, and I certainly find that difficult as like a native Liverpudlian, where I left Liverpool because it's too far that way. It's like, we're the best city in the world. But at the time I was working with companies in London, and I was like, well, it's just not true. Everyone who's saying that hasn't been outside the city boundaries. And I come to Birmingham, and there's loads of things I love about the city. It's very similar to Liverpool in me, that it's friendly, it's open, really easy to get on. But it's sort of the thing that's opposite for me is that there's a real lack of like, you could be the next Ben Francis, because Ben Francis is someone who's done like fantastic, and I think we should shine a spotlight on, if he's happy to have that spotlight. But who are the people who've come before him? Like that's the gap, right? And who are the people who are coming after him? Because there should be like a long line of like Birmingham sons and daughters who are going on to achieve great things. Hope that answers. I felt like I talked for quite a while there.
It's interesting. I was going to invite Amanda to come back in, because on that, I guess it's a point of ambition. So a business is happy to go at steady pace, so they're not getting the ambition. Does something like Gymshark and Ben Francis, and hopefully others, do those stories, will they increase the ambition of up and coming entrepreneurs? Is that part of the answer? I
think so. I think, when we look, you give career talks and you talk about role models. You can't be what you can't see is often chimed in. So if we can't see the unicorns, we can't see the businesses that are hitting that level of success here, then what are we striving for? How can we get that confidence? So again, we talk about Gymshark, but if you see the Ben Francis and the Gymshark machine and the story they're telling constantly, then hopefully that seeps in to show what can be done and to have them as a role model. So, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about rocking our rock stars. We get a couple of them out there. And not only does it start to tell a story for us, because the stories of individuals, pizza delivery boy made good come through sharper on a national, international stage, but it gives others the confidence as well to think, you know what, this isn't a lifestyle business. This isn't just a business that I'm happy to tick along. And that's probably the other thing that we've got is a pro and con being based where we are. We've got that lovely, friendly, supportive community. We've got a low cost base that, that cannot be underestimated. We are cheaper to be based here than elsewhere. However, we also have a fantastic quality of life. So to Jay's point, there maybe are some founders there who are thinking, actually, life is good, tick along, make money, and actually have the lifestyle as well. But if we are wanting to see that kind of aggressive growth and aggressive ambition, then I think it is about role models. It is about boosting those stories and coming behind them.
We've got a comment here from Stephen Johnson. Stephen, you're an investor, and very kindly you've put your email details on the screen. But I think it would be useful to get your view as an investor. So you live in the region, you work for Mercia, you typically invest 2 to 4 million in the Series A stage. What's your experience as an investor in terms of, have you invested in businesses in the region, or do you find yourself going outside of the region?
Yeah, I do have to leave in 1 minute. I'm really sorry, but yeah. So I backed one business in Birmingham, which was Vox Pop Me, who also have a team over in Salt Lake City. And Dave, for any of you that know Dave, he's an incredibly ambitious guy, and he realised early on that if they were going to make it a success as a software business, they had to crack the US. So he up and moved his whole family to Salt Lake, which was a bold move. But it's paid off for them. They're doing very well.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't have any special insights to offer. It's very easy for us as investors to kind of sit in an armchair and, you know, say, come to us, you know, we'll invest. And I know it's very hard running businesses. You know, we work with founders and it is tough, particularly at the scale up stage. I think there's lots of businesses who can get to the $1 million revenue point, and it's going from that point upwards where it really becomes hard, because up to that point, the CEO can frankly hero it. They can, if they're a really effective operator, they can do a lot of that themselves. But beyond that point, you can't rely on yourself. You have to bring in a good team around you that can, you have to enable a machine effectively and step away from it a bit. So, but I mean, as I said, I do have to go, yes. But I would buy, if anyone does want to talk, I mean, happy to either just one-to-one or in another forum like this, if happy to share ideas and bounce around what we can do. But as I say, we are actively investing in the region, so it's always painful to read there's not enough funding around when we desperately try to do our best to meet companies, but it's not easy, as you can imagine. But
cool. Well, thank you for the offer, Stephen. Thanks for joining. We've got Paul. You want to step in, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in the sort of financing in the region for quite a long time. Obviously, firms like Mercia and Midven and Foresight, etc., do the best they can. But there is a historic underrepresentation of equity funders. That is a key problem. The Midlands Engine and others are aware of this, and, you know, Andy Street is aware of it. It's just that trying to, you know, encourage new VC type investors into the region is not easy, but that would make a big difference. You know, and at the end of the day, places like London, Oxford, Cambridge, you know, have been successful for a number of reasons. But I've always thought, you know, you've got to somehow develop critical mass of entrepreneurs, investors, and professionals. Unless you have that critical mass, it's very hard to develop a community, and you do need a community. And both the East and the West Midlands has had phases of having reasonable communities and then it fading away again. So it's not an easy subject, but at the end of the day, role models, and I have to say leadership, is critical. And the tricky bit is, you know, who is responsible for trying to develop an active tech sector? Who is responsible for ensuring that the equity funding is appropriate? It's pretty hard to nail that down. So, you know, people like the British Business Bank do their bit, but for me, the aspiration isn't high enough. You know, we have to have more investors. We have to have more hubs like iCentrum. You know, there are hubs in Birmingham, but we just need more if we're going to develop critical mass. So that's my input for you.
Cool. Jay, Andrew, any
if I can go, I thought that was excellent points, Paul. So one of the things that Yanis and I have identified at Birmingham Tech Week, sort of how we can help, you know, after the week's over, is we're quite passionate about having sort of being the forum or like the conduit to bring investment companies together and bring entrepreneurs together and try and have like a pitch format where it gives the opportunity to maybe 3 companies every 2 weeks to be able to sit in and pitch to investors and get that practice. And I think, yeah, we're looking a lot about how can we import the professionals and the expertise from outside of Birmingham in through digital as we can at the moment. And then, you know, we'd hope that in time, those resources would actually start locating in the city. So, you know, they're here on the ground level and they can be in it every day like we all are.
Cool. So I want to finish on a positive. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I think we're going to try and help Amanda and Jay and Andrew and all of us out here. So we're going to use a Menti, and the question that I want to pose is, what makes Birmingham a great place with potential for investors, for people to come in, for scale-ups, for companies that are starting. And so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully what we'll be able to do is, let's do that. And so has anybody used Menti before? So you should be able to see, if you go to menti.com, and there is a code that you can put in. So if everybody gets on their phones, or if you're on your laptop, get to menti.com and put in the code 6176099 and put, I think, the space 4 answers per person. What makes Birmingham a great place for scale up? So let's start to shout about Birmingham. Let's create the story. And as you fill that out, it will happen live. So if everybody doesn't do it, we're just going to be stood looking at this empty screen. So we've got it starting to come through. So inventiveness. Okay, so everybody get on your phones, put in what makes Birmingham a great place for startups, and let's see what we think as a community who are working here. Okay, culture and community. What else have we got coming up? I've managed to get my bar right across the middle of the screen, so I can't actually see it. There we go. The diversity. What do we got? It's cosmopolitan, it's inventive, the people, the location, entrepreneurs. I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they said that actually they run a scale up, quite a successful fintech, prop tech scale up in the city, but they're also sit on the board of a VE that invests in prop tech. And his view was, actually, he recommends that none of the businesses he invests in, well, he doesn't recommend to any of them that they work in London, because actually one of the big things he says about Birmingham is its location, its cost, its convenience. So what have we got there? Inventiveness, entrepreneurs, quality of life, passion, the city. It's a young city, the spirit, diversity, supportive community. So I think this is what we want to start to shout about for the city. I think we've had a session where we've identified a lot of the challenges and thought about some of the solutions, but I think part of the key message is it is with us as a community. And so, as Jay has said, I think Birmingham Tech Week will be doing more than just Birmingham Tech Week, and there's going to be a real focus on how we do this more. So I think we're pretty much out of time. I'm just going to invite each of the panelists just to give one more kind of quick reflection on what you're going to take away from this. So Amanda.
What I'll take away from this, I think it's that there's a lot of ambition and there's a lot of will here. It's just directing it. And I think I keep banging on about it, but I think it is about individual storytelling and businesses telling their stories. There's obviously other more structural challenges as well. But I think if we can get behind a couple of big stories, then a lot of these things will start to be pushed down by the profile.
Thank you, Amanda. Jay?
I think my takeaway is that the pandemic is potentially like a great leveler for us. So whereas other cities are a little bit ahead because they've got, physical offices and there's people in those cities already, those things have sort of fallen away now. And Birmingham Tech Week and this session is showing that, people are willing and excited to contribute regardless of where they are, and we can do that virtually. So I think we've got this huge opportunity going forward now to really build from the starting block.
Cool. Andrew, last word with you.
I think we've got a great opportunity. I think we can do so much better, and I think we have a lot of good people trying to make that happen. I'd also the point Jay just made about the effect of the pandemic and companies going remote. as a hirer of highly qualified staff, you cannot underestimate how much of an opportunity that is. So yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you to the panel members. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and participated. And there are so many great sessions coming up today. So hopefully you'll go to lots more sessions at Birmingham Tech Week. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for joining. Bye.